Hey, Pitt. Hey, Louisville. Welcome home. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Pitt, Louisville, from the ACC to the Big 12. That is from Dan Wetzel of YAHOO Sports. He says that is what should happen next. We'll start there. We'll also go Deion Sanders out the door, leaving Colorado in 2026. Maybe. And then the Big 12 schedule is scared. Why are we playing so many games on Friday nights just to avoid the big bad SEC and the Big 10? High school football is on Fridays. This is a bad move. I'm going to explain why. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Are we going to poach the ACC? Brett Yormark says we're open for business. Here's more.
Drake, a report, a rumor, a little bit of a storyline came out that the Big 12 should be looking to add a couple of ACC teams. Obviously, we talked about the settlement with Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC. We've kind of projected out what that might look like in 5 years, who may be going, who may be staying. But is the Big 12 still open for business, even if it's 5 years from now?
The Big 12 is very much open for business and less than 5 years from now. Dan Wetzel of YAHOO Sports brought this up, saying that the Big 12 is a perfect match, in essence, with Pittsburgh and Louisville. And I think the conference would agree. If I am Brett Yormark, here's where this becomes very realistic. Louisville is the 5th most watched team over the last 5 years in the ACC. Pitt is the 9th most watched team. They're sitting around that same spot as North Carolina State or Georgia Tech or Duke, who could be a very good addition, Virginia Tech as well as the Big 12 Conference. And the reason Brett Yormark will want to strike is because the price tag is getting cheaper and cheaper for those schools to leave the ACC and come to the Big 12. And if you want stability, stability is found in the Big 12 Conference. We're going to give everyone an equal revenue share. We're not going to give you revenue share based off of how many viewers you get. We're going to cut your revenue share based on how many viewers you get across the board. Whether you're Utah, West Virginia, BYU, UCF, or Louisville, you're going to get the same amount. And that is something that's very enticing, because a school like Miami 20 years ago would have benefited tenfold from the ACC's new algorithm. They're not today. The reason being is when your program starts to decline. Earlier, when you were good, the algorithm sounded great. That bonus structure was great. Now that you're not good anymore and you're making less money, that's where this entire thing starts to teeter and it's unsafe. And then you learn that it's a $75 million cost to get out of the ACC in 2030. Clemson, Florida State, UNC are going to pay that. If I'm Louisville, if I'm Pitt, and I want to stay alive, my first call is Brett Yormark, and Brett Yormark should pick that phone up 10 times out of 10 and say, we will bring you in on a full share. You know, I've brought up on my show, if Oklahoma called the Big 12 and said, hey, we want a share and a half, we want a share and a third, we'll come back to your conference, pay us more. You could probably do that just for the brand power of Oklahoma, having a perennial contender, a historic blue blood in football. I don't mind that. But when you can get Louisville, who is a king, they generate money even when they stink at both football and basketball. People just love sports in Louisville, and the football team has been on the up the last few years. Their basketball team, as good as they are, also bring in a massive price tag. Pitt, with the rivalry against West Virginia, would finally elevate West Virginia, and you don't have to give them extra money. They'll both take equal shares to everybody else and be plenty happy with that. TJ, one of the points I really want to hit on here, West Virginia came into the Big 12, and a lot of us remember them as being very good at football. They were in the Big East. They came in the Big 12, and in the last decade, they haven't carried their weight. There's no two ways around it. They fired 2 coaches in the last 10 years. They haven't been in the AP Top 25 since like 2018. They never were under Neil Brown. They have not adjusted well to the Big. They are the Texas A&M of the Big 12. Yeah, a couple good years here and there, expectations, but they never delivered on it. The way the A&M went to the SEC and has not delivered. They need a rival to come into the conference and lift them up. Utah coming to the Big 12 immediately helped BYU. Now they have even more to play for. Our rival is here. Pitt being in the Big 12 is like when there's an orphan kid. Do you send them to the orphanage with or without their sibling? If you send them with a sibling, things are probably going to be a little bit better. Pitt can be that sibling that lifts West Virginia out of where they have been these last 10 years in Big 12 play. This across the board is a positive for the Big 12 Conference. Dan Wetzel of YAHOO Sports, who mentioned this on his podcast, is spot on.
So I guess maybe a logistics question is, I wonder how they would be able to, because, you mentioned the $75 million at 2030. It's $18 million a year more every year you back up, right? So it's 93 the year before. It's, let's not ask me to do any more math than that. So
111, I think.
Yeah. You're asking a lot of me at this point. 111, then 127. How would the Big 12 help with that? Because I don't know that Louisville could afford that at that moment. Are you asking ESPN to jump in there? Like, how is that feasible?
Private equity is going to be huge here. Private equity is going to be huge when it comes to any of these investments. What this becomes is Brett Yormark goes to the table and says, hey, this is an investment. I know so many pundits, so many very good reporters, very articulate journalists have talked about how it would be bad for the Big 12 to sell its soul. I am still of the mind. Venture capitalists, bad idea. Don't love it. Please no. Being the All-State 12, billion-dollar contract, 10 years, branding completely reformed, that's fine. That's great. Go do that. Then at that point, you're looking at All-State as the table saying, hey, here is where your investment's going to pay off. Here is where your sponsorship's going to pay off. We are going to invest by bringing Louisville, by bringing Pitt. How much does the Big 12 pay of their exit fee? That's where we start getting in the conversation of tampering. And I don't know exactly, like legally, if the Big 12 conference could help them, because now you're in essence assisting with them paying to get out of their grant of rights. And that just sounds like something that's probably not very legal today. And what are the repercussions if you do that? Do you accrue a fine if you're the Big 12? Is that fine worth it? A lot of question marks, a lot of semantics. There's a lawyer in this country who probably knows way more about it than me. The logistics of this are certainly tough, but we just saw Texas and Oklahoma do it. We just saw the entire Pac-12 from Stanford and Cal to Washington to Utah to Colorado. They all did it. It is not, how do I want to put this? It feels easier than ever right now to exit your conference and enter a new one if it's best for your school. And with that, the Big 12 can capitalize by bringing in Louisville and Pitt, even if it takes dancing around some red tape.
Are there other teams that you think would fit really well in the Big 12? Maybe that's a good way to wrap this up. I mean, obviously, yeah, the Big 12 would love to have a Clemson and Florida State. I don't know how realistic that is at this point. North Carolina, some really big brands and stuff. But are there other programs you feel like kind of along that mold of Louisville, why they make sense, Pitt, why they make sense, and whether they're ACC or not, just other teams that you think would fit in well?
Yeah, so it was the Wild Ute who tweeted out a list of where their brand initiative viewership share figures sit for the entire ACC. Florida State, Clemson, Miami are the top three. Georgia Tech at 4. I think Georgia Tech brings in, they're not a very good football program right now, but the eyes are there. And as long as the eyeballs are there, that's going to help you with TV contracts. And Atlanta is a great thing to have in your back pocket. Louisville is in that 5 spot. They're a good addition. I think Stanford at 6, UNC at 7 are both options that aren't on the table for the Big 12 right now. But NC State at 8, Pitt at 9, Virginia Tech at 10. So Georgia Tech, Louisville, NC State, Pitt, Virginia Tech seem to be the schools the Big 12 would go after first. That leaves Duke, Syracuse, Cal, Virginia, I should say, Wake Forest, Boston College, SMU probably out of the picture. And hey, maybe you do. If you're going to add 5, why not add 6? Include SMU in that and say, hey, pay your own way for a few years. If you have a free team who's going to the college football playoff and brings in DFW, you're not going to complain about that. And they're a rival with Houston, with Baylor. And then what if you do consider Duke in basketball? I mean, there are semantics when you get to that 5 or 6 team mark, but I know guaranteed the Big 12 would benefit day one from Georgia Tech, Louisville, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and then throw NC State in that fold as well. This conference would not lose money by having those teams, those schools, and therefore I think Brett Yormark, who is the ultimate businessman, who's always open for business, would strike if those universities say, we are willing to make this move to get out of the unstable ACC and come to the very stable Big 12. Today's show is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to Order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com.
Coach Prime. Let's just get right into it, Drake. It gets rumored every year, but what are the chances that this is Deion Sanders' last year at Colorado before we even get into spring?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about it in the offseason because Deion Sanders is such an enigma in football. He was a celebrity first. He was an NFL legend first, now the head coach of Colorado. A lot of his career has hinged on his sons and where they are. So the question being posed is a fair one. Without his sons in Boulder, how long will he stay? But according to Motorcycle Sports, Deion is vowing to shape the future of college football with his coaching magic. There are storylines in and out of that program that are all very positive right now. Last offseason, much of the national media was taking shots at Deion, saying he could not win as a head coach at the Division I Power 5 level. He has now proven that he can do so at Colorado. And the more that we see, the more headlines pop out about his son in the combine and him as a head coach. They're by and large positive, unless they're from reporters that like to make things up and keep things juicy just to generate clicks. And I mean, the amount of NFL players who have come back to be assistant coaches for Deion just shows that the program he's building is one that has longevity. He didn't install all of this to be there for a year, 2 years. And if he did, he would have already left. If he did, he would have taken a job with the first, second, third overall pick in the NFL draft this year, drafted his son, and then ridden off into the NFL sunset, left Colorado in the dust. Instead, he is committed to this 18 to 23-year-old age range at CU and making that program elite in college football. Now, the question becomes, TJ, can he keep the winning standard? Can he win without Shedeur Sanders? Can he win without Travis Hunter? That is a fair question and one we're about to find out the answer to. If it's up to me, up to you, I'm not sure if I can buy 10-win season for Colorado right now, but that's okay. They don't need to win 10 games to prove that Deion is still a very good head coach. Let's keep in mind, he just lost a Heisman caliber quarterback, arguably the best in this class, and the actual Heisman Trophy winner who played wide receiver and corner for this team. Replacing those two guys is going to be very tough. It is as important now for Deion Sanders to bring consistency to Boulder than it ever has been in these last few years. And I think he's going to do that.
Mentioned some of the guys leaving, and that kind of goes. He's even talked about that, right? We're not going to replace a Travis Hunter. You need 5 guys to be able to do that. Where in their returners that are coming back this year, where will they try to lean to find success, and whatever that success number is for this year? I don't know. I mean, Coach Prime is not going to say anything less than 12-0 is success in his book, but where do they try to lean to have some success this season?
The first place you're going to have to start here is with quarterback. And I can't give you this laundry list of how Colorado will win in 2025 without starting at Caden Salter. If he is the guy, and we all kind of anticipate that Colorado will have a quarterback battle in this offseason, and I don't mind that whatsoever. I make the case a lot that where we sit in college football, to bring in a transfer quarterback, give them $2, $3, $4, $5 million a year and say they're going to be the guy, just kills whoever was sitting and waiting for that role. They're not improving. And the guy you brought in who's like, oh, well, I'm the starter now, they're not improving. Create competition. Colorado is going to do that. And I believe they have enough. They have enough guys on the defense who are returning that they can make waves in the Big 12 this season. If you ask Athlon Sports, they would tell you you Colorado is preseason 10th in their power rankings. I have them a bit higher in mind, especially as the defense under Robert Livingston took a big step forward last year. I believe with the Colorado defense being improved, if that unit is their bell cow, this is an 8, a 9-win team. Doing that without, again, an elite quarterback and a Heisman Trophy winner, very impressive.
Yeah, it feels like if they can get a little bit more out of their defense, which their defense was one of the more underrated parts of their team this year, right? Like everybody focused on, and I know Hunter played defensive back too, but everybody focused so much on what Hunter and Sanders and the offense were able to do at times. And the weapons they had, like it wasn't just them, it was, the wide receivers were some of the best in the country. There was a lot of good that went on. But if the defense takes another step forward and I don't want to say dominates, but just plays well in the Big 12. If the offensive line, right, you've got Seton coming back, you've got a lot of guys there on that unit that played much better than they did in 23. If those two units, right, we talk about games being one of the trenches, the team with the better defense a lot of times will come out on top. You don't have to rely so much on 2 top 5 picks, right? Because you're just in more games because you're playing more complete football. And to me, that would be the path for Colorado this year, is to maybe play a little bit more complete football, better defense, better offensive line, better rushing game. I know that Coach Prime talked about that all through the year. Hey, our running game just got to get better. And toward the end, it did. They had some things kind of open up there. But if they can play a more complete game, I think it'll go a long way towards them having more success this year.
I believe so, and I think the defense will be as strong, if not stronger, this season. That will help anchor them. And like I mentioned, Caden Salter, Juju Lewis is the freshman they're bringing in, who many people are high enough on they believe he could start day one, could carry things as a true freshman. I want to back off of that a little bit, because in today's era of college football, players have never been older, and asking a true freshman to lead a team on the gridiron is a very tough thing to do. So competition is going to be good for Colorado, but a storyline that we'll all be following very closely in the spring is Juju Lewis and Caden Salter, whether those two guys can build an actual competition and go toe-to-toe, or if Salter has just taken the job from Liberty and now at Colorado altogether. So quarterback's number 1 right now. Number 2, sewing that defense up. Again, like you said, you lost your 2 most important players. They're gone. Offensive line, defensive line. But that unit of the defense, figuring out your quarterback, are the top 2 things Deion can do in the spring to ensure by the time August rolls around, his football team is ready. And again, what he has displayed in the transfer portal 2 years ago, he took 50 guys. This season, the transfer portal took like 20. Because he said, I don't need overhaul. I already brought my Louis bags. I need to fill gaps. I need positive attrition. If you can't make it here, transfer out. If you're a transfer who can improve our football team, come play at Colorado. That is his message. He is sticking to that swimmingly. And I think what Deion Sanders is going to prove, even this spring, is that he is a very good football coach.
Yeah, you mentioned this the Salter Juju talks, and man, we have seen so much here lately too. There are a few true freshmen that jump in because there's not that elder statesman that can really kind of hand the reins off. You think about Rayola at Nebraska and others that have had to step
Lagway,
in. Yeah. But even Lagway wasn't the starter until Mertz went down, right? Yep. That they went with Mertz because I do think coaches value that time. Arch Manning sitting behind Ewers. I think coaches do value, first of all, it's the idea of that jump, right? How many true freshmen are really ready? Nico at Tennessee sat behind for a year and probably would have been better suited in 23 to play his redshirt year. But I think it's not only like, are they ready? It's the idea of like, man, what can this guy learn from this guy? Like you look at the NFL even, the guys who kind of have a little bit of time to sit behind somebody for a year, year and a half, 2 years. Not that you have 2 years in college, but the guys that have a little bit of time to sit behind somebody, usually it does pay off pretty well for them. Not to say that Juju couldn't go out and win the job and be really, really successful. But man, how good could he be in 26 if he sits behind a really successful Salter this first year?
Yeah, I think that's what will be the big storyline next year is Deion stays with his star quarterback. And that star quarterback might not have started a game this season, but with Juju Lewis sitting behind Caden Salter, if that's the way this pans out, and I think it could be very positive for Colorado, even if they win, again, 7, 8, 9 games with Salter as the head man, but you give Juju a chance to develop into that role, they're going to be very happy with how it plays out in 2026.
Drake, we've talked a little bit about scheduling in the Big 12 earlier when we talked about rivalry games. Is the Big 12 making another misstep with this Friday night? Is epidemic the right word? I don't want to say I don't want to go full on pandemic.
It's a pandemic anymore. Can't say pandemic.
But thoughts on this Friday night situation with the Big 12?
It plays off as scared, and not having a rivalry weekend is something that I said is a scared move by the Big 12. Look, I'm very supportive of Brett Yormark. I think that his regime as commissioner of the Big 12 conference has gone swimmingly, and I trust the guy as a businessman, no doubt. It doesn't mean he's infallible. It doesn't mean there aren't things I disagree with or that I would want to change. And another piece of this is announcing a myriad of Friday night games in the Big 12, trying to build viewership that the conference otherwise wouldn't have got if they're competing with the SEC or the Big 10 on a Saturday. That's the message here. We can't compete with the SEC. We can't compete with the Big 10. It's the same reason college football and the NFL try to stagger things as not to step over each other, because neither one wants to compete with the viewership of the other. The Big 12 saying, hey, we're going to go on Friday nights. Here's the biggest problem. The biggest problem with this. Your conference is mostly predicated on the state of Texas and high school football. Everybody loves that the Big 12 is able to recruit these 3-star, 4-star kids from the high school ranks and turn them into knockdown, drag out, good old gridiron football players on Saturdays. Well, now those kids are on the gridiron while you're playing your marquee football game. Now in the state of Texas, every Friday night when the Big 12 is having a game, that it is religion there. I mean, I worked in radio in Texas for 5 years, and on Friday nights, everything shuts down. That's the same way in Georgia. It's the same way in Colorado. It's the same way in Arizona, where those kids are trying to make themselves better athletes to compete at the collegiate level. Now the Big 12 saying, hey, when Kansas State goes at Arizona, when TCU goes at Arizona State, which could be a huge game, when West Virginia on a rebuild goes to BYU, or Houston at UCF, you're not going to be able to watch that game because we're going to put it on a Friday because we don't think that Saturday would get as much viewership. So that's what we're looking at. I mean, even Utah at Kansas, which is the last game of the regular season for both of those schools, is on rivalry weekend on a Friday. I just don't know how much juice, and maybe those two teams, Kansas bounces back, Utah bounces back. They create a top 15 matchup that has Big 12 championship, possibilities, capabilities, something's on the line there, maybe. But now it's on a Friday. You lose the luster of this big time Saturday college football by putting your games here. And I know. The message is, well, we want to do things different. We have to do things different. We have to catch up. But it plays as scared to me. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as not having a rivalry weekend. Sure, you're getting creative, but if your creativity is kind of invalidating you as a conference, was it worth it? If you're throwing the white flag out there, you're waving it and saying, you know what, I give up. We're going to have to play a lot of games on Fridays. The SEC would never do this. The Big 10 is not doing this. The Big 12 is, and that's just not a very good optic.
Yeah, I do think there's some pros, and I don't think it's great for what you just mentioned, recruiting. It's my least favorite thing. I think Florida State plays 2 Friday games this year, and I don't like that, right? It's short week. It's not the same amount of rest that you would normally get. Now, 2 of these are opening week of the season, so not as big of an issue there with Georgia, but those are the out of conference ones, right? The Georgia Tech, Colorado, and the Auburn, Baylor.
Yeah, but I want to note here, TJ, they just moved that Baylor one like last week. That's a very odd move to say, hey, coming up with this up-and-coming SEC school that needs a big win, up-and-coming Big 12 school is trying to get back in the saddle with its head coach. Let's move this game off of Saturday. Another one, again, that's like opening weekend of Texas high school football, too. And the game's in Waco. Stupid.
Yeah.
You know, why now? Why this?
So, to play devil's advocate, to counter it a little bit.
Yeah.
Could it work for what Yormark wants? Like, it does hurt the recruiting side, but like Georgia Tech, Colorado, a Georgia Tech team that led the ACC this year in viewership. Now, let's put some guardrails around that. One of those games was a standalone game in Dublin where no one else was playing. The other was the 7,000 overtime game against Georgia. So Georgia Tech has never, outside of last year, led the ACC, but against the Colorado team that we mentioned in our last segment, no more Hunter, no more Sanders. I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue there. You got 2 games on Black Friday, like you mentioned, the Arizona State rivalry and the Kansas-Utah. If both teams have bounced back, that could be a big one. Though we don't love it, Could this end up working out really well from your mark, from the marketability, the TV standpoint? And could we will we look back and say like, okay, didn't love it for certain reasons, but for other reasons, this move worked out?
There is a very good chance that because the way Brett Yormark works, we all go foot in mouth and say, you know what, Brett, you did it. But I kind of go back to some things that happened last season. It was TCU that lost to Houston on a Friday night, and it lost a lot of the luster. Most people are not watching college football on their Friday night. The belief here is that there are enough diehard fans that will turn it on the way they do the NFL on Thursday, or the way they do the NFL on Monday. There are enough diehard fans that they'll watch a game on Friday. And honestly, if this was a Thursday deal, I'd be way more fired up about it. That is an opportunity where the NFL is on Prime, so they're not garnering as many eyeballs. It's tougher to get to. Where if you're carrying a Big 12 game on a Thursday night where two teams are coming off of a bye, you're giving them even more rest for the following Saturday. That's great. The big piece of the Friday that bothers me, again, is butting up with high school football, competing with high school football, and competing in a market where, again, most college football fans are not used to watching big, good games on Friday unless it's the Pac-12 championship they played on that day. So, for so many years. And yeah, he's a genius. He's a super genius. So maybe we do look up in a year or two and say that worked, but I'm not sure if I'm just not sure if the ratings are going to be there for the Big 12 conference. Whereas on a Saturday, maybe you open up that door. And at the same time, this TV, the way that the TV plays into this, hey, we could have had you on FS1 on Saturday. Now we can have you on ESPN2 on Friday. I probably make that trade. I would probably say yes to that so that every bar in America, every TGI Fridays in America is carrying the Big 12 on Friday night. But still, most people who are football fans have reserved Thursday for Thursday night football, Friday for high school football, Saturday for college football, and Sunday for the NFL. And trying to teach an old dog new tricks is not very easy, especially when Texas is your most important state. This looks at all the Texans, the proud Texans who love Big 12 football, and it says, hey, we're going to play in the middle of your coveted high school football night. Sorry about it. And those people just aren't going to watch.
Yeah, I think and I will say, to now play devil's advocate to my own self and say like, oh, well, maybe this does work out from a ratings perspective. The ACC plays a lot of big games on Friday nights too, because they're scared, I guess I'll use the same word that you did at the beginning of going up against some really big matchups in the Big Ten and the SEC. The ACC on Friday nights this year, Louisville and Miami play. That's been a great game for the last couple of years. Florida State plays twice on Friday nights. Clemson and Louisville play on Friday night. SMU has a game on Friday night. Belichick has 2 games on Friday night. And so I think there's some competition there. Not that the Big 12 and the ACC are really competing, because I think they're more on the ship of let's stay together and let's kind of do things in unison. But, if Clemson and Louisville is on a Friday night and you've got a Big 12 game that same week, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a pretty tough ratings draw for those Big 12 teams anyway, just considering Clemson could be a top 5 team at that point. So, yeah, it might work out. But it might just fall on its face, and then you might just have the frustration of the recruiting thing and not really see the ratings bump. A lot of that's going to depend on how good the teams are that's playing, right? If there's a ranked matchup for one conference and unranked for the other, it doesn't matter who they are, right? Florida State's playing some nobody, then who cares? But I do think that there's a chance that it fails both ways, the recruiting side and the TV side. That's TBD, I guess.
No doubt. And I don't know. I mean, there were so many Saturdays last year. The Saturday where Georgia played Kentucky and it was a tight game late. That was the only really good game on that night. And the Big 12 could have an opportunity to showcase a really good TCU Arizona State game there and be the marquee game of the night, since the SEC takes the afternoon slot with their A1 game. But we've decided as a conference, nope, Friday it is.
Drake, you don't just do content on Fridays because you're not scared. Where can people find your show and follow you, bud?
Yeah, at Drake C. Toll or at Ella Big 12 on Twitter, and wherever you find your podcast with Locked On Big 12.